Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
I'm Nancy Crandall, host of this edition of the podcast, and with me today is Art Martin. Art is the Director of Collections and Exhibitions at our world-famous Muskegon Museum of Art. So I am delighted that you're here and agreed to do an interview with us. What does Director of Collections and Exhibitions mean?
Yeah, it covers a lot. Primarily, it is to guide, pull in all the feedback, all the various, the team partners, board input, community input, and shape that into the exhibition and curatorial program. So boiling that down, it's what shows we're showing, how those shows work together, what we're collecting, how we're showing what we collect, and then how we are educating about that, what stories we're telling, and again, just how all of that integrates, and then right down into how does it get from point A to our walls for our public.
That sounds like a big job. I often hear you referred to as a curator.
Yeah.
What the heck is a curator?
Right. So I thought about that. It's going to vary wildly depending on the size and the scale of the institution. But at its core, it is that primary arts historian, arts educator. And so to curate is to shape or to organize in such a way that there is a story there, that there's a message there. And so the curator takes whatever we're doing and distills that down into an educational and also entertainment product. And so in our circumstances, that's, encompasses much more, and that gets down to exhibition design, working with various team members, what is the show going to physically look like, working with the educator on what is the programming going to look like. And so certainly a lot of it, in any given show. So for example, recently the John Stewart Curry exhibition was going to original letters and sources for Curry and finding more information about our artwork, about more information about Curry's life. Working with our wonderful guest curator on incorporating her writing and work into that, editing and producing a book. And so again, it is. I go back to the storytelling aspect of it. It's bringing all of these different facts into the artwork and then putting it in a way that communicates most clearly to the public kind of what we're trying to say. And so it's not just a collection of stuff we put on the wall, but that a lot of careful thought has gone into how you see it, how two paintings may work together, how they talk to each other. And so that might be a very abstract work with nothing recognizable or representational, has a lot of visual elements that work together that might put it right next to something very realistic, something where you recognize every element. Maybe it's figurative, maybe it's a still life, but somehow those two objects speak to each other. And so for our guests, you're shaping that experience and you're giving them guides or hints or ways to experience something that maybe they're familiar with and you want to give them a new story. Or it's something they're completely unfamiliar with, and so you've curated that in such a way that you can work your way through it, that it becomes accessible. But I suppose for the home collector, you curate your own collection. You decide what books are on your shelf. You decide which books your guests see and which books you tuck away and read all the time in order to just, it's that message. It's that positive foot forward and what you want people to see.
That's fascinating. How did you get to this position? What is your background?
Right. So I grew up loving art. I liked doing things with my hands, and so I went to school for painting. So I actually have a master's degree in painting. And to pay the pay the rent, I picked up 10 hours a week of teaching and 10 hours a week in the art museum on campus at Wichita State. And so I started in collections management, which is the museum's librarian. Where's the work, loan paperwork, all of the care and maintenance of a permanent collection. And so when I came to Muskegon, it was for that job. And part of that was very much working with all of our area artists, living Michigan artists, and our own permanent collection. And so usually in museums, no one knows the collection better than the collections manager. They move it, they shape it, they know where they inventory it, so they know everything. And so it became an opportunity for me to build exhibitions out of the collection, finding things that, maybe hadn't been out in a while, but were very fun and interesting and exciting, and starting to do some shows like that. And then working with our living artists to do several invitationals. So we'd pick a theme like fairy tales, and I'd invite 20 or 30 area artists, and we did a lot of fun, kind of exciting shows. And we do 14 to 18 exhibitions a year, and that was simply too much for one curator. And so Jane Connell especially was my predecessor, and we had a great working relationship. And so I did a lot of, work closely with her and led a lot of the shows. And so when it came time and she was looking at retirement, I thought, I'm enjoying this, and there's a lot of fun, great opportunities. So I applied, and the board was gracious enough to take me.
Well, I'm glad they did. And how long have you been at the Muskegon Museum of Art?
I started in 2001. So a lot, more than 20 years now. And I've seen it grow. It's always had a wonderful collection and wonderful community support, but in that time period it was sleepy. And I think it's been really rewarding to be part of a team that just really pushed to make it a community space again, that everyone was welcome, that we were constantly seeking partnerships, be it local government or community groups or other cultural institutions, and just really being the place that said, we are here for everyone and we want you here, and how can we work with you? And now it's, now we're looking at doubling the size of the building.
That's so exciting.
So yeah, it's been a ride.
Well, that museum is such a treasure for this community. Who and how is it decided what art to buy? Whatever the art is.
Sure. Budget. We have a collections committee that is made up out of our board and volunteers from the community. And that is done very deliberately so that the collection is always responsible both to the community and to the institution, so that no one person can come in and kind of radically reshape the terrain. But we've established a list of priorities, and that is based on really the history of what the museum has collected. And so, the core of our collection is very Western, early 20th century American and supportive European works. And then for us, and part of it is going to be with the addition of the Bennett collection, so a collection of paintings by women, all realistic paintings by women. Also looking contemporarily. And so it's going to now be a mix as we look, where do we fill in the gaps? We can't be encyclopedic, and so we can't have everything in art history. And so we look at the things that build on what we already have, and that goes back to that kind of storytelling element. What have we missed? Who have we missed? What can really jump on the walls? And then looking contemporarily, what can we do to continue to collect that in the next 30, 40 years will be the next big thing that people look to. And so we have a list. It's a list of 75, 80, 100 artists. It's a huge list. And so we follow auctions, we work with dealers, we work with collectors, and it becomes a mix of, wonderful opportunities where people who own wonderful works of art are looking to a legacy where that stays in the community, where maybe a collection stays together. It's something they've built over time, and so our collection is absolutely indebted to collectors like that. So if we look at our works on paper collection, we have this incredible collection, Rembrandt and Dürer and some of the early German and Dutch printmakers, and that was all through Elsie and Margaret Walker. And the Walker family has continued that legacy with monetary gifts that build the collection. We're looking at the Bennett collection, which is ultimately going to be over 200 paintings from throughout history, all by women. And then the remainder of the things where we've been able to really focus and acquire. And so for us, that's been a number of contemporary artists that we think really have something intriguing to say. And then historically as well. So I know one audience favorite I've really seen recently, and it's one I love too, is a Reginald Marsh painting. And it's a couple on a Coney Island spook ride. And you have to it immediately just resonates so strongly with the audiences. And so that's really what we're looking at, where we can direct our resources and really do something that the community and museum goers that come in from outside the area grab onto and say, oh, wow, that's amazing, and how is it here?
Speaking of that, I'm aware that you recently went to Houston to look at a painting that was offered on auction. Right. Is that a common thing to do? Definitely.
We want to do due diligence, and with the rise of and quality of digital media, you can now absolutely get in and zoom in, and you can see every crack and every crinkle on a painting often on a screen. And you can do all the research. What are they asking for? What have paintings gone for recently? You can track what the market's done. Is the price right? Is it good? But at the end of the day, with an auction, it's worth whatever the people at that moment are looking to spend on it. But going down in person, it's a physical experience. And so to see the paint surface, to feel the paint surface, to get an appreciation of the scale on the wall. When we're making an investment with our resources, we want to make sure it's right. And so, I went down and looked at the work, pulled it off the wall, checked for signatures, looked at the condition of the piece, and then had an opportunity to talk to the dealer and, get the provenance, the history of the work. The grandson had recently looked at the painting and said, oh, yes, absolutely, it's authentic, it's good. And so it's those opportunities so we don't end up in a position where you get something and it arrives and it's half the size you thought it was, that it's all just kind of underwhelming. So.
And how, in situations like that or in any piece of art that you're looking at, how is price determined?
Price is set by demand in part. And so the higher in demand a thing is, the more the value tends to rise. And you certainly see that with, you have a blue chip company, we call blue chip artists. And those are going to be the big household names, a Monet or a Picasso. These artists are going to sell for tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, enough that often gets into kind of the broader media that, an Edward Hopper painting just sold for some huge record-breaking number. So that's always a determination. Often it's what example of it is of an artist. So certainly artists have their off days, or they have a lesser piece, a smaller piece, and that affects price. But ultimately, demand and reputation tend to really affect what a set price is. And then with living artists, it's often it just becomes, what are people willing to pay for a thing right now? And we certainly find ourselves in circumstances where people are offering us things, and someone wants $25,000 or $30,000, and we're looking and we're saying, we love the piece, we're excited about your career, but you're out of your mind. Which is to say, if you're getting these prices, we're super excited for you. But with us, when we have so many options out there to make, we just have to be careful with the kind of investment you're making. And often, especially again with the living artist, you tell them, what do you need? What you've invested your time and your effort, and where is sort of your breaking point? And you hope that prices continue to go up.
You mentioned the Hopper. I know that the Hopper, the famous Hopper painting that the Muskegon Museum has, was recently on loan to the Whitney Museum in New York. Would you explain how that loan business works, both the loaner and the recipient of the loan?
Sure. So one of the things that museums really take on the obligation when they collect is that you're going to continue to build scholarship around your artwork, that you want to preserve it and protect it, but also keep it in front of the public. And so with the Hopper exhibition, the Whitney had recently acquired a lot of Hopper's records and ephemera. And so they were able to get letters and ticket stubs and notebooks and brochures, all of the things that he had accumulated as just a lover of the city, a lover of New York and its entertainment. And so their curator wanted to do an exhibition around his relationship with the city. And so ours being one of his earliest paintings where he really gets back into oil painting. He's sort of relaunching his career as an artist. And ours is very much a New York restaurant scene. We even have a letter where he writes about he was trying to capture the hustle and bustle of a lunchtime in New York, which of course with Hopper is a little ironic given he's known for these sort of isolated, quiet moments. And so for their curators, it was a painting they were familiar with. It had been in a number of other Hopper exhibitions. And it was one that compositionally and subject matter-wise looks very similar to some of what are going to become his most famous paintings. So Automata and Chop Suey for people that are familiar. And so they wanted it. And so they form a letter, and that comes to our museum, and it says, here's the exhibition we're doing, here's when it is. Here is the story we're telling. Here's where your painting fits in. There's going to be a wonderful catalog. We're the Whitney, so we know we're going to have hundreds of thousands of people through. And so for us, it needs crated to be protected. Everything goes with a fine art shipper. So that is, the back of the truck has climate control, so heated and cooled to about 70 degrees. They have wonderful air ride shocks. I've been told you can leave a half-empty coffee cup in the back and it will still be there when you land. I don't know if that's true, but I have had an air ride truck come up with screws still sitting on a running board from Chicago. And so it's a comfort ride. And then internationally, we'll often require a courier, someone that goes along and is with the crate at every transfer point. You watch the painting be opened and installed, and then it's up in the show. The borrower's ensuring that work. They're protecting that work. We make sure the venue is secure. And so for our own Curry exhibition, we sort of did that reverse. There were paintings that, because of the Hopper, we were able to say to the Whitney, of course you have the painting that launched John Stewart Curry's career, Baptism in Kansas. We would love to borrow that in return for our Hopper. And so when we had the Whitney on board, we were able to leverage a lot of other very well-known Hoppers from other major museums around the country. And there it's a formal letter. There's a process. In our case, the board formally votes to allow a painting to leave the museum. And then it's negotiating crates and shippers and when's this going to be picked up and how does this have to be picked up and who can we use and who can't we use. We had one physical courier, so you're coordinating flights and then that person comes in and watches the painting open. They watch it go up on the walls. They help you do the condition reporting, so you're looking for any changes in cracks in paint or buckling in canvas or chips in a frame. We did a couple virtually. So we're moving a camera around a painting as we move it into the walls. And then, it's a great way to increase the exposure of your collection. So in our case, we've had paintings travel all around the world. And it is as everyone knows American Gothic, The Farmer and His Wife. And everyone knows Starry Night. And in a lot of the ways, that has happened because those paintings have traveled. People are familiar with them, people recognize them, and so the more something moves around and the more eyes you have on it, that's often how paintings become famous. They capture the public imagination and they're out in public view enough in enough places that builds. So
That's great. When you talk about hanging, who, and probably you, but how do you determine when you're doing an exhibition what's going to go where?
Sure. Really kind of two directions. One is that goes back to that visual storytelling, and then also goes to the art historical angle on it. So in the case of Curry, our executive director, Kirk Hallman, really wanted to show people Curry's story before we got into the art. And so we created a gallery with our designer and my team and figured out, what does that look like? How do we tell this story in little bite-sized pieces with panels and illustrations? And so that show was very much determined by that kind of art historical angle. You walk through Curry's story first, and then you come into an introduction to his work, and then we have 3 giant famous Curry paintings all together in this big panorama, and then you move through a show in that way. So it might be in that sense. We do our annual juried exhibition, and that one is very much my team just responding to the work. And so we pick sight lines. We pick places where the audience will walk in and see from across the room something very big and dramatic. We find pairs where 2 paintings just talk to each other. Maybe they're a similar subject or similar colors or similar ideas. And those go together. And so in that way, we move you through the room as if it were like a theatrical stage. And you can see each of those moments that we've created for you. And it draws you from one place to another. And often shows become a blend of that. So we have a wonderful jewelry exhibition show we opened last night. We worked with the team from the Driehaus Museum to sort of collaborate on that. And they have organized it a little by time period. And so you walk in and you have 19th century revival jewelry, and then you move into Tiffany and Art Nouveau, and then you finish out with Art Modern and a few contemporary Chicago artists. And so it was, finding ways to keep those things together so you move through a kind of art historical approach. In other cases, we'll put a painting done in the last 5 years to a painting 200 years ago. And because the artists are working with similar ideas, you have this wonderful opportunity to say, they were thinking about the same things. They were telling the story a little differently, but the same ideas were coming out in, 1542 that came out in 2015. So it's always fun. And then there's just little exhibition tricks. 60-inch center so that the middle of a painting is at 60 inches. And that is an average height of people. And what that does is give you a little bit of visual organization where a really big thing can be next to a small thing and not feel very strange. But then you also have to watch out you can't do a big thing next to a medium thing next to a small thing because they make a pyramid on the wall. And that doesn't work. So you get to kind of go back to that early art design training. And then we work, we get to work with color, with text. We can produce our own vinyl now, so we do big vinyl panels and vinyl letters and blow up images on the wall. When we did the student illustration, the last illustration show was with Oliver Jeffers, and we had some of his little characters hidden all over the museum. We made giant crowns that hung on walls. We turned a couple walls, they looked like crowns. And so we can, it's always a very fun, creative process.
Yes. Well, I was thinking about how you've made all this fun over the years, which brings me to the golf art that you did.
Yes.
And I was fascinated that you created this whole miniature golf course around certain paintings at each hole. And you and your crew built that whole thing.
We did. We were looking for an interactive show. We wanted to give our wintertime audience somewhere to go and just, usually you can't touch the paintings. The paintings need to be here for 100 years. You can't touch them. But it's also very fun to go in and have this visual art experience where you also get to physically participate. And so we looked at a couple avenues, and then our former collections manager mentioned that some of the museums he'd been at had done miniature golf. And so we thought, well, we can do that. But we wanted it to be an art experience too. So yeah, as you said, we picked works from the collection. Each one of us, our preparator Lee Brown, James Moloston, our collections manager, and myself, 9 holes, so we each got 3 holes. And we picked an artwork, and we picked what we wanted to do, and yeah, we designed and built 9 holes of golf. I never thought I would be shopping for AstroTurf in my job as a curator.
Well, and you had to be a carpenter and an engineer. It was so impressive what you did. It was just fun.
I know, I'm trying to sneak it on the schedule again.
Tell us about the Bennett Prize. People are becoming more aware of this, but I think a lot of folks don't quite understand what it is.
Right. So the Bennett Prize is a biennial award. It's $50,000 to a woman who paints realistic figures. And so the level of realism can vary. It can be photorealism to kind of a semi-abstraction. But the aim is to increase the public awareness and public support for women artists. And then specifically within that realism genre. And that is because of the interests of the founders, Stephen Bennett and Dr. Elaine Melody-Schmidt. And they contacted us in 2017 through a mutual acquaintance. They were collectors, and they were finding that as they were working with the women they were collecting, a lot of them were single mothers and they were struggling, or they were having trouble attaining the prices that their male colleagues were getting for very similar works and often better done works. They weren't getting the exposure they wanted. And so Stephen and Elaine were really trying to think, how can we go beyond, we can't buy all of this art from all of these women to support them. We can't afford that. What can we do to kind of impact more people at once? And so we, Judy Hayner and I just had a conversation with them and said, what does a prize look like? And we kind of talked them through that. What was a good amount? How does that work? And they called us again and said, okay, what if it's a show? And because our museum had traveled a number of exhibitions, we'd organized a few big fiber shows. We'd worked with the Henry Ford to do a big Herman Miller exhibition that traveled. We do our own annual juried show. We had all of these different experiences that just sort of meshed perfectly into what they were trying to do. And then we had done the big Edward Curtis exhibition. And so Stephen and Elaine were able to come and see, that we weren't just, we were a small Midwest museum, but we were willing to talk with them, to hear their ideas, to treat them respectfully and openly. A lot of museums hadn't been willing to do that. And they saw we could do it when they saw that Edward Curtis show, and they saw, tens of thousands of people coming to Muskegon just to see an exhibition. And then we'd switched directors, and so Kirk Holman came aboard, and we met them in Chicago and hashed out the Bennett Prize, which is we get entrants from all over the country. We had over 800 women this year apply for the show. We're, in fact, in the process of jurying that, so we'll pick 10 finalists. From that, will be selected a winner. So we'll do an exhibition of the 10 finalists. That travels for 2 years. And then the winner has 2 years with the $50,000 to create an exhibition. And so right now, Shiking Dang, who won last year, she's working on her art, and that will premiere in May, along with the new 10 finalists. And so that's just been it's grown. We're in the 4th cycle now, so more exposure. And for a lot of the artists, it's been because of all the social media exposure, because they can put that great thing on their resume. A number of them have gotten gallery representation. Several museums have gone on to collect their work. We've collected some works in that kind of, that speculation. We love this painting. It's part of our history now. And we hope you'll be successful, more successful in 20 years, and we'll have a real treasure on our hands.
Now, you said over 800 applicants this time. Who decides who the finalists would be, and then who decides who the winner will be?
So we pick there's a panel of jurors, so it's 4 jurors. It's up to now, it's been one of the prize founders, so Stephen, and then this year it's Elaine. And then artists who have the kind of careers that a lot of our entrants are aspiring to. So very successful artists in their own right. And then museum directors, museum curators, so that we have a blend of artistic and institutional feedback. And so then we average scores, and then there's a conference where the jurors sit down and talk back and forth about what represents, not just what really the work is, but kind of what represents what a lot of these women are painting about, what themes are recurring, what ideas are being explored, and then what also then well represents the prize. Because it's positing this is what women are doing. This is kind of what we feel like is the best figuration being produced by living women today. And so it's kind of a big burden on the jurors to say, yes, we think this is the best and this is why. And we think these artists have a lot of promise, and they're someone we want to get behind them and support them and promote them. And so once those finalists are picked, we also do some workshops, some professional development with them, so that we're supporting all 10 and not just ultimately that prize winner.
Okay, that's wonderful. And you mentioned earlier the Bennett collection.
Yeah.
Tell us what's happening there.
Right. So Stephen and
exciting.
Elaine, yes, when they started collecting, they arrived at figuration by women, which is to say they felt realism. If you're telling stories about the human experience, that the human figure is the best way to do that. And so they wanted to focus on that, and they wanted to focus on supporting women. And so they found themselves in a little bit of a strange place as they were beginning, because there weren't a lot of collectors doing that. There wasn't a lot of, the path hadn't been very strongly tread yet. And so they started contemporarily, and they found as the collection grew that by adding some historic works as well, so, a delightful Mary Cassatt, Artemisia Gentileschi, Suzanne Valadon and Elaine de Kooning. By adding these historical works, it really bolstered their contemporary works as well, and increased the exposure of the collection and the interest from other museums, from gallerists. And so as they've built this collection now of over 200 paintings, and looking at their legacy, I think it was a very funny kind of aside in a talk where Stephen mentions, and they're thinking about, finding a home for their collection when they're gone, to which you're like, well, we should say something, right?
Right.
And so that has become now a renewed commitment on our part. So as the collection will come to us over time, Stephen and Elaine were also incredibly generous contributors to the expansion, and so the pavilion will be named after them. Was a commitment on our part to support women in the arts, which amounts to, every year there will be a minimum of one exhibition that focuses on women, living women, past women, the Bennett collection, which was an easy commitment for us to make. I went back and kind of went through the records, and since 2001, we've done an average of 2.5 shows exclusively about women artists, be they living or past. And so it was an easy thing to say, yes, we want to continue to support women. They'll absolutely be part of our regular rotation, which isn't to say we won't do other things. Mini golf for John Stewart Curry. But in the case of Curry, we backed that up with an exhibition of quilts from Curry's era, almost exclusively by women. There was one baseball quilt done by a man that was just too cool to not put up in the show. But it's that commitment that's come with that Bennett collection, and it is a stunning collection. For those names people will recognize, and those names that people won't. But the paintings just talk to you, and especially the ones that are contemporary, because these artists are using. We're surrounded by visual language all the time. People see it in ads, you see it in videos. You are surrounded all the time by this visual language, and you sort of subconsciously pick up on all these cues. And these artists are picking up on the cues that we all share today. And so it's this chance to see your own world reflected on the walls.
People from our museum actually went to San Antonio to look at this collection before this whole thing was settled. So you had a chance to see what it was.
Yes. Oh, yes.
What it is.
What it is. Yeah, board members, staff members, Stephen and Elaine are incredible hosts. But yeah, a chance to truly see what you're talking about, to get a sense of the scale of it. It's always so exciting, and then there's always just the nitty gritty. Can we house it? Can we store it? How do we get it here? Is this a commitment that we have the resources to take on? And after everyone had seen it and it was so exciting, we thought, we will figure out how to have the resources to take this on. And then that Stephen and Elaine came in and said, yes, we will make sure you have the resources, and to have made that contribution.
And that brings us, of course, to the expansion, which is probably the most exciting thing in this community in a long time. It is just amazing. So talk a little about the expansion. What's included?
Sure. So the expansion was very much driven by our success, which is to say we had run up against, we just didn't have the building for what we were accomplishing. We needed bigger exhibition spaces for more ambitious shows. We needed classroom space. We needed a more functional exhibition space. And with all the people that were coming in, we needed entertainment space. You really shouldn't have parties inside the gallery. So the expansion gives us a new feature gallery that will be just under 5,000 square feet. And so that gets us into a threshold where we were looking at some exhibitions and thinking, we just couldn't quite accommodate them. We were just too small. And so in addition to that is 3 more galleries. So on our upper floor, we'll have 2 rotating spaces. About 2,200 square feet combined, that will let us continue to do our annual student exhibition, our annual juried show, and then also bring in smaller shows that we've organized or become available to us. And then in the basement, a works on paper gallery. So, we have over 3,000 works on paper. It's often hard to get those out into public view, and so this gives an opportunity to do that. And of course, we get a lot of interest and inquiries about the Edward Curtis since our big 2017 show. So this will let us have a little sample of that out all the time without having to dedicate the whole building to it again. New storage. We had definitely run up against storage. And then, when you talk about 200 new paintings coming into the collection, this gives us an opportunity to continue to collect and expand. The 2 new classroom spaces give us a space where there'll always be an activity, there'll always be something to do. As a parent, that's often how we see museums. Someone keeps a kid occupied in the activity space while the other one makes a run through. But it's a great way to get a hands-on experience for people. Then that new classroom, the new store, and this very grand atrium that I think is a space very hard to find in our community and in any other building, where we'll have this, experience of light and art moving through the center axis of the gallery. So,
with a spectacular sculpture that's going to hang.
Yes, Beth Littman, a glass artist out of Wisconsin, does glass still lives, and so it will be a lot of objects from our permanent collection. Hanging in a large cloud of Americana and art history right through 20 plus feet of ceilings. So it'll be a grand sculpture, glass sculpture that is just not something you see here in Muskegon.
And for when the museum opens in the spring, the new museum, there will be some new artwork.
Yes.
Some of which you can't talk about yet, I think.
We're hiding a few things back. We've been actively collecting the last couple of years with the expansion in mind. So one thing we're going to be able to do is the existing building will largely be dedicated to our own permanent collection. And so we take, a small percentage of that's been able to be out and increase that dramatically. I think the biggest change people are going to see is, the favorites and the most recognizable are going to be in a completely different room. Which is always fun because often you'll have people go, well, when did we acquire that? And we say, well, 80 years ago. Oh, I've never seen it. Like, well, it's out all the time. You have seen, oh, yes, you're right, I have. So just that different context, I think, allows for discovery and rediscovery. But we have approximately 80 to 100, somewhere in that range, of American studio glass. And so that will now be featured in one of our galleries. And that's out in little pieces, or we'll do rotating shows with it. But for the first time, that will be out all the time. And so, of course, we have several Dale Chihulis, which is, of course, a name everyone recognizes. But we have a lot of artists that came out of his studio that trained with him and trained subsequent generations. And so there's this wonderful history where you move from that kind of basic bubble, this sort of candy-colored bubble, into new, very sculptural things. And so we have a couple of glass pieces we've acquired that will premiere. So as we talk about some of those things we've been hiding, there's a painting or two. There will be a big exhibition of new acquisitions as we launch, and that's going to reflect the purchases, but also those legacy gifts that I mentioned earlier, where people have said, we really want our artwork to stay in public view. And so, we love your museum and we'd like to see it stay. So, we're always looking for those wonderful people to share and grow our collection too.
One of the exhibition that's coming up that I've been hearing a little about, but I think the public would be interested, is the Julia Child. And how are you getting ready for that?
Yeah, so yes, Julia Child, organized by her foundation and a traveling exhibition company, and that goes directly to that issue of needing that 5,000 square foot gallery. The minimum specifications were about 5,000 square feet. So we are getting ready for that. It tells her the story of her life, from her early exposure to France and Parisian cooking, to coming through to creating the cookbook and then the television show. And so we've been working with their team to how does it fit in the space. That's that very logistical side of the curating, just how do you get it in the room? And then from our own end, with our design team, how do we enhance the art element of it with how food has tied into art and how artists, so we have certainly food related works in our collection. So we'll be working to how to integrate that. And how do we, just kind of create some moments, visual moments that'll pop through the room as people walk through that guided tour of her life. And then also working in programming, how do we tie in cooking and area restaurants? And there's talk of doing a Julia Child opera where apparently the singer bakes a cake on stage. And so working with cultural partners to do that and really make it not just a fun exhibition, but a community-wide event where the whole summer is just surrounds cooking and community. So
that just sounds like so much fun. Are your carpentry skills going to come into play again?
In this case, most everything is built.
Oh, good.
So we will be, as soon as we get the go-ahead, we'll be building new walls for our space. We have, because we, the great thing about the expansion is all of the galleries are designed to very much be a kind of a blank slate. And in any given moment, we can completely change what the gallery looks like. But that means, we'll be building some walls, we'll be building some pedestals. And so the expansion does include a new workshop. Which is wonderful. The museum, the team saves thousands and thousands of dollars every year by doing all our own work. And working with actually a lot of Muskegon partners. So, Muskegon has all these wonderful small manufacturers. And so we're able to go to them and create different components that we then come back and combine into all of the things that we do. And so that's always been a fun partnership too. It's like, oh, what new materials do you have? What new technologies do you have? How can we get that on the walls of our museum? Or in the case of the expansion, how do we get Lauren Industries products on a building in Muskegon instead of, in far off Taiwan and China? How do we get it here? So it's been a wonderful.
That brings the point that so many of the local manufacturers are represented in the work of the expansion, like Lauren Industries and the cladding for the outside of the building, that you've managed to keep a lot of this local.
And I think, and that really does go back to our mission. It is amazing for Muskegon to have an institution like ours. I'm still, as surprised sometimes by our collection as I was when I first got here. And when the museum opened in 1912, it was the biggest museum for a community of our size, this dedicated art museum. It was built as an art museum, which, it's not in an old federal building or an old mansion. It was built as a museum. And to have that resource and to have it be so always whether it was the early art classes on the stage in the auditorium to today, just very much being about and supporting the community, at the same time positing itself as a national or even internationally known institution. So our paintings have traveled the world. The Curry Show was in, close to a dozen national magazines. It's a funny place to kind of be in for a community our size, but then to always very deliberately go back to community, and to have a very incredible community to have pulled off this expansion. So many great supporters.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's still surprising to me that we've been able to raise the funds to actually do this. That was a nice summary. Anything else you want to add to people should know?
Yeah, I think just there's always something for someone to discover. There's always something new. We try very hard to bring in new ideas and familiar ideas and blend those all together. With the new building, it's going to be a great way to spend a little time with friends or family that you're bringing in, be they out-of-town guests or you just need something to do with some family on a weekend. And over the coming years, we've got a lot of fun and exciting. Edward Curtis will come back. We're working with his descendants on an exhibition. Mini golf is jumping its way around the schedule a little bit. We've got this wonderful new partnership with the Dree House that's currently our jewelry exhibition. But they've got a lot of treasures we're looking forward to sharing. And our ongoing support of living Michigan artists, be it our annual student show or our annual juried show, these new objects with the Bennett collection, so much more of our collection being out. I think it's a really exciting time for us to, again, constantly have something new and different going on, and in a space I think people are going to just be stunned by.
I agree. It's good stuff. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your knowledge of the Muskegon Museum of Art with our viewers. And thank you for watching today.